my name there. I'm a EURES advisor in Sweden, European Employment Services. My name is actually Czech, so I have a Czech background, but I've been living in Sweden now for 17 years. My presentation, I've only got 20 minutes, so I was thinking if you have questions or if I say something that you don't understand or you want to have more information about it, then please come down and talk to us at our stand afterwards, because I don't think we have time to have questions and dialogue now, although I prefer we have a dialogue. But now it'll be a presentation and then you can come down afterwards. Okay, facts about Sweden. I don't know if you've been in Sweden at all, but I've got some facts here. It's the third largest country in the EU, and that's when it comes to area, as in the size of the country. It's a very, very big country, so we have a very sparsely populated country, 9.6 million people, which means about 21 people per square kilometer. So it's mostly forests. And if I think I was looking at Wikipedia this morning, that if you look at Croatia, then you have, I think, 72 people per square kilometer. So I mean, far less people than here in Croatia. We have our own currency, so we don't have the euro, and we're a member of the European Union since 1995. Big country, very, very long country. So if you turn Sweden all the way around on its axis, all the way around here, then the top of Sweden, which is the very north, will go all the way down to Rome. So I mean, you can imagine the length of the country. We're very large. 65% of the people live in the south, and when we talk about the south, we're talking about here and then downwards. That's where most of the people live in Sweden. The three major cities are Stockholm, Gothenburg, and Malmö. I myself live here in a town called Örebro, which is about 2 hours from Stockholm. Where are we? We're situated up in the north. So these are our dear neighbors. We're Scandinavians. So we understand the Norwegians to the west, who are very much known for their cross-country skiing. We have the Danes down here, known for the Danish pastry. And the Finns are known for their sauna, or what we say bastu in Sweden. And I think what Sweden maybe is mostly famous for is our Midsummer night festivities. In actual fact, our national day is on the 6th of June, but it's something that's been introduced quite recently, the national day. And if you ask a normal Swede why we celebrate our national day on the 6th of June, then most people won't be able to answer why. But I mean, Midsummer Eve is the big festivities in Sweden, where everybody in Sweden is doing the same thing, which is basically dancing around the maypole, doing very stupid dances, and we like to drink schnapps on Midsummer Eve. So it's a very, very, very big holiday in Sweden. Famous Swedes. I think one of the most famous ones at the moment is Zlatan Ibrahimovic, and I think he has a background in Croatia. I believe his mother is Croatian. Maybe I am right or wrong, but I think that's right. I was speaking to somebody downstairs who'd read or seen the Stieg Larsson films, the Millennium books. Ingmar Bergman, film director, you recognize them. ABBA, IKEA, H&M. So these are some famous Swedish names that have made it through internationally. Some of you I've been speaking to downstairs, and I think the message is that if you want to work in Sweden, then you're going to have to need some sort of basic language skills when it comes to Swedish. And in fact, it's basic. It's just that you have started to learn Swedish, and maybe you know a few words of Swedish. But there are some jobs that you may be able to get past using English only, and those are mostly within IT, if you're doing programming, some sort of engineering jobs, and maybe no client-facing jobs where you're just working, maybe truck driving, that sort of stuff, that you can get by using English only. But I mean, at the moment, as far as employers comes, they will like to see you speak at least some sort of basic Swedish. So that is probably the biggest hinder that you have here today to getting a job in Sweden. But there is some hope, and there's this website here. It's an institute called Svenska Institutet, si.se. If you go in there, there is Learn Swedish Language. So you can go in there and you can already start now, if you're serious about working in Sweden, is to start going in there and do an online language course. And it's free of charge. So anybody can go in there and start learning Swedish. And you also, I think, can hear somebody speaking Swedish, so you get the pronunciation. When it comes to language, I don't think it's a difficult language to learn. I mean, the grammar is quite basic. If you speak English, then you'll recognize the grammar. The difficult thing about Swedish is the pronunciation. There are sounds in the Swedish language that are maybe different from Croatian or different from English, which makes it difficult. But I think you're probably able to pick up words quite easily, and the grammar is certainly not as difficult as some languages like French or Czech or German. It's a Germanic language, so it's near to German. This is why we're here today. These are the occupations that we're looking for today. As you can see, they're very highly qualified occupations. These are our shortage occupations in Sweden at the moment. The easier jobs, or the more, if you say, simpler jobs are difficult to find because we have quite low unemployment in Sweden at the moment, 3%. So Sweden is doing very well at the moment. And this is where we have problems finding or recruiting people in Sweden within these industries. Some facts about working in Sweden. It's a 40-hour week in general. Work 25 days vacation per year, so that's the minimum. You can get more. I myself, for example, if I work in the state sector, I have 35 days vacation. So I mean, that's also something that you can negotiate, is number of vacation, but it's quite generous. We haven't got a national minimum wage in Sweden, as you might see in other countries. We have collective agreements, which is basically agreements between the employer side and the trade union side. So they do collective bargaining agreements every year, and they come up to what is the minimum agreement for a particular occupation. So you have to, if you want to find out what your occupation's minimum wages or collective agreements was, you can actually go onto the websites and try and find the information through the Swedish, and most of the sites have the information in English as well, so that you can see whereabouts you can think your salary would be then. And then very often when you're talking to Swedish employers, it's also part of a negotiation between you and the employer, what your salary will be. Just your rights as an EU EEA citizen. You are Croatian citizens, so you have the right already today to work in Sweden, so you don't have to get a work permit or a residence permit. You can start, if you get an offer contract, you can start working straight away. You don't have to go through any bureaucracy or anything to get working permits or residence permits. And the thing that you do is you get an agreement with your employer, you get a contract with your employer, and that contract is your key to actually coming into the Swedish society, because then you use that contract to get your Swedish personal number. You may have heard about the personal number in Sweden, which is something that is very difficult to get. But if you have a contract, that's your key to getting the personal number. And once you have the personal number, then you become part of Swedish society. And what I can say is that if you get the personal number, then you will also be offered Swedish language courses by the local municipality where you're living or where you're working, so that you can get free Swedish courses while you're in Sweden. But you need to get this personal number, which is the difficult part. So the key to actually becoming part of society is the contract, or is the work contract. This is for recognition of foreign diplomas. There's this website called NARIC, which has a list of the regulated professions that you need to look up. So you need to check up if your profession is regulated in Sweden, and if it is, then you can come to this website, the Swedish Higher Education Authority, where you can send in your diplomas to them, uhr.se, and they will help recognize your diplomas here in Croatian and translate them to what is the level in Sweden, so that the Swedish employers will be able to understand what level of your education is. uhr.se. How do you find a job? Arbetsförmedlingen.se is the local employment service. So here you can go into this website and click on the job database, write in the name of your profession, and hopefully you might find a vacancy in English that you understand. Otherwise, most of it is in Swedish. You can also use the European EURES website, European platform, to find the jobs. But most of the jobs that are here in Arbetsförmedlingen will also be found on the EURES website. And obviously also you can also find newspapers. Jobs in Stockholm and the local.se may have some jobs as well with English language. So that's finding the job. Applying for a job. You don't have to go through the Arbetsförmedling or the public employment service to apply for jobs in Sweden. It's very normal that you contact the employer directly. So in their vacancies, they will have an email address or they will have a website through which you would apply. And the norm in Sweden is that you will always send your CV. It'll be maximum 2 pages, never more than 2 pages. Even though you have a very long career, try and get it down to 2 pages because employers don't have time or don't have the inclination to keep on looking through long CVs. And then you'd have a cover letter. And the cover letter, the difference between the CV and the cover letter is that the CV is a static, basically a representation of what your jobs you've done and when you did it and your education, whereas the cover letter is what you can actually modify to the job that you're applying for. So don't send the same cover letter to all the different employers that you're applying for. If you're applying for one job, then try and modify the cover letter to suit that employer. Try and look at the vacancy, what are the words that the employer is using in the vacancy, try and mirror those words in your cover letter so that they can actually understand, okay, this person has actually read my vacancy and they're actually really interested in my company or in the job, so that they recognize their words in the cover letter. So that the cover letter is something that you modify to the actual job. Here's an example of a CV. I have another one here. And you may notice that I don't have the Europass up here, and I know Europass are coming in here after me to do their presentation. Swedish employers don't use Europass. So if you can make your own CV, your own personalized CV that looks something like this, then I think Swedish employers will recognize it much more than the Europass. They think the Europass is too complicated. It's the same. So all the CVs look the same, and through here you can actually put your personal touch onto the CV, and they get some sort of idea of what you are as a person through the CV. Reverse time order, so put your latest job on the top and then backwards in time. Always your work experience on the top, because that's the most important thing for the employers, and then your education after that, and then maybe the softer skills lower down on the CV. One thing that you might be sort of curious is that we do our dates the wrong way around. I say, Swedes normally say that everybody else does it the wrong way around, but we're the only country in Europe that this way, so we do our dates the wrong way around compared to the rest of Europe. I think I have, the cover letter here. I have just here a short example of what a cover letter could be like. First paragraph is a reference to where you saw the advert. Maybe it was somebody here, you meet me, or you saw it through me. You can say I was at a job fair in Croatia, or you refer to the EURES website. Where your reference to it, the middle paragraph, or the strong points, is your strong points. Why do you think that they should give you the job? So this is where you mirror the words in the vacancy, so that you put your strong points forward in the cover letter. And then it's always nice to conclude. The next step is that I'm looking forward to hearing for a Skype interview, or sort of I might follow up with a telephone call or something like that, so that you have a way of going forward in the next step in the recruitment. So CV and cover letter directly to the employer, that's very normal in Sweden. Okay, so you've got as far as the job interview, be on time. Very important in Sweden. We are A-time people. We are not, and I'm not going to say anything bad things, but we're not Italian or we're not Spanish. We like to be on time in Sweden, and maybe a bit early, so you're there 10 minutes before so that you're ready. That's very important in the job interview. Dress accordingly, of course, depends on what the profession is, so you try and sort of mirror what your profession is, so you dress properly, but smart casual will pretty much always work in Sweden. Sometimes, I mean, we're not very formal in Sweden, so we don't use suits and we don't use ties very much. Maybe the very high banking and the high-end lawyers use shirts and ties, but mostly dressed like this is pretty normal in Sweden throughout working life. 3 of some of the most common questions is that tell us a bit about yourself, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and where are you in 5 years? So they maybe have some sort of idea of your ambition going forward. This might be something of a bit of a shock when it comes to culture. We have very flat organizations in Sweden. And what do I mean by flat organizations? It means that the boss is part of the team. So we don't have a boss up there who says, do this, and then everybody does it. I think it's pretty expected that if the boss comes with an idea, that the boss will be opposed by his teamwork. So they will say, well, why don't we do it this way? Why do you want to do it that way? So that we have a sort of consensus of going forward how to work. So that's what I mean by flat organizations. As I said, we're pretty informal. We don't use titles, we don't use Mr., we don't use engineer. We use pretty much first names. I call my first name, my boss, Tony. So it's very informal. And yeah, we like to think gender equality, women and men on the same level. And as I mentioned earlier, with the trade unions or the collective agreements, we have strong trade unions at work in Sweden. I'm going to go over these because they're not very important. This one is important, yeah. Unemployment insurance. If you get a job in Sweden and you're working in Sweden, you are not automatically insured against unemployment. This is something that you actively have to do yourself. You have to choose which unemployment insurance fund you want to belong to, and you have to actively become a member of that unemployment insurance fund. And then you have two levels of insurance. The basic insurance, which is 320, which is the lowest level. And then if you become a member, then you can also insure yourself by paying a little extra to the unemployment insurance fund, and you get a higher level. I made the mistake, because I used to work in Norway, and I moved to Sweden 17 years ago. And in Norway, it's docked from your tax. You're automatically unemployment insured. And after working in Sweden for about 5 or 6 years, one of my colleagues said, well, which unemployment insurance fund are you a member of? I said, what? I'm automatically insured against unemployment, but I wasn't. So straight away I became a member. So that's something that many people don't know, is we are only a few countries that don't have this automatic unemployment insurance. So remember that if you move to Sweden and you have a job, then think about the fact that you need to become a member of an unemployment insurance fund so that you're insured against being unemployed. Some of you who maybe know a bit more about Sweden maybe have heard of this word called fika, which is the word for coffee or coffee breaks. It's also a cultural thing here in Sweden, is that you get to work at 8 o'clock in the morning or 8:30. You sit down, you turn your computer on. This is how I feel it. You sit down, turn your computer on, and then you go and have a coffee break. And then you meet your co-workers and you have a coffee break, which is the fika. And you might think it's inefficient, but that's where things happen. A lot of the decisions, a lot of the collaboration with your colleagues happens in the coffee break. So it's something that I wouldn't ignore if you're working in Sweden. I wouldn't say that if you're thinking you're being good and working at your desk because everybody else is at the fika break and you're working at your desk and you think you're impressing your boss, maybe it's not the right thing. It's better to be at the fika, get to know your colleagues and become part of the team. It's quite an important cultural thing in Sweden. We tend to avoid conflict, probably also mirroring against the consensus that we like to take decisions all together. We take our shoes off indoors, a bit like in Japan. You never walk in with your outdoor shoes indoors when you come to somebody. This is something that I've been talking to a lot of people downstairs. Oh, it's so cold and it's so dark. And yes, it is. I mean, it's dark and it's cold in winter. But I think when I lived in England or when I lived in France, I froze more in England than I do in Sweden and Norway, because we're used to it. So I mean, everything is heated up indoors. It's much nicer environments indoors for the winter. But and everybody's looking forward, obviously, to the lights, to the summertime, because then we have, up in the north, you have 24-hour sun. The sun never goes down. And even in the far south, you have very, very, very long summer nights. So it's very nice in the summer. Not as hot as here in Croatia, though. Temperate climates, I mean, we can have, when a heat wave comes in Sweden, we have maybe 30, 35 degrees for a week or a couple of weeks. Maybe sometimes. A good summer, you have 2 or 3 weeks of 35 degrees. But normally it's 25, 20 degrees. This last summer wasn't very good. It was a rainy summer. And a lot of people talk about the summers and what sort of summer it was. If you want to get in contact with us even more, we have a chat every Friday through the EURES portal. So if you open the chat there, then you speak to, we have 5 colleagues who operate this chat, so you can always go in there from between 10 and 1 on Fridays and speak to them. EURES Sweden, like us on EURES Sweden, every week, or every day of the week almost, there's new jobs coming out on the website there. So you'll probably have a lot of jobs within those shortage occupations that I mentioned earlier. Will come on the Facebook website. And we also are in on LinkedIn. I think if you look up on EURES Sweden on LinkedIn, you'll probably find a tech group, an IT group, maybe a health group as well, if you have a health occupation here. Become members there so that you can come into contact with us. That's it. Tack. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. As I said, maybe I have said something here that's raised questions in your head that, all right, what did he mean by that? Then come down, we're three downstairs, so come down and speak to us and maybe we'll be able to answer your questions. Thank you much.